I ngā mana, i ngā reo, i ngā kārangatanga maha tēnā koutou. Te arawa waka, te arawa tangata, tēnei te mihi atu. Kia koe, Stevie, te koro matua o tēnei wāhi, ka nui te mihi atu, kia koe. Thank you for the invitation to take part in this symposium about building our regions and the future of infrastructure in New Zealand. I want to acknowledge the Chief Executive, Stephen Selwood, Chair Andrew Stevens, and Infrastructure New Zealand staff for putting together the program for this symposium, and I can tell by the numbers here, it will be an exciting 2 days. This morning you heard from my ministerial colleague, Shane Jones, about our government's priorities for infrastructure and regional development. Tomorrow, Ministers Grant Robertson and Phil Twyford are also speaking here, and the announcement of the newly appointed board for Te Waihanga demonstrates our government's commitment to a strategic approach to infrastructure. From each of our ministers, ourselves, you'll hear about the government's clear focus and broad mandate to develop and improve our country's infrastructure, whether it's related to water, housing, transport, regional development, economic growth or climate change. Infrastructure is a crucial enabler for New Zealand to improve social, economic, cultural and environmental well-being for all New Zealanders. But transformational outcomes for our people, communities, environment and economy is exactly the ambition we need to have in order to do things differently. As Minister of Local Government, I'm privileged to be able to lead the government's partnership approach and conversation with local government, to work together to facilitate local government's role in ensuring the delivery of essential local and regional infrastructure. Your program over the next 2 days reflects an extensive agenda of work in the local government space. The work streams are closely interrelated, each contributing to a phased, coordinated, informed approach to enhancing the local government system and well-being of our communities. This morning I'll reflect on some of these key work streams and their importance to building prosperous, healthy and resilient regions. I want to start where I left off in my address at last year's symposium. Our priority to deliver the fundamental right of safe, clean and affordable water for all New Zealanders wherever they live. Last year I canvassed the serious and widespread challenges facing our Three Waters system, highlighted by the findings of the Havelock North Drinking Water Inquiry and the government's Three Waters Review. The case for change is clear and has been widely publicised. The Havelock North contamination incident in 2016 resulted in around 5,000 illnesses and 4 associated deaths. We simply can't allow this to happen again. Nor should we put up with a system where around 34,000 people across the country become sick from drinking their water every year, and many thousands need to boil their water to drink it safely. This is unacceptable for a developed nation such as ours. As many of you will be aware, our government has responded by recently announcing a suite of regulatory reforms, not only to ensure the delivery of safe, clean drinking water, but also to improve environmental outcomes from our waste and stormwater systems. Improvements that are system-wide, from source to tap and back again. The new regulatory framework will establish a dedicated water regulator, extend regulatory coverage to all water suppliers except individual household self-supplies, provide a multi-barrier approach to drinking water safety, including mandatory disinfection of water supplies, with exemptions only in limited circumstances, strengthen government stewardship of wastewater and stormwater services, with regional councils remaining the primary regulators for the environment, and provide transitional arrangements of up to 5 years to allow water suppliers to adjust to the regulations, with support from the new regulator if necessary. The new water regulator will have a range of responsibilities and functions, including sector leadership, compliance monitoring and enforcement of drinking water, capability building, information advice and education, and performance reporting. We're still working through the details of the institutional form and scope of the regulator. It could be established as a standalone entity or it might form part of an existing organisation. Likewise, we need to consider the benefits and feasibility of including regulation of all three waters within a single entity. These details will be the subject of a Cabinet paper conversation next month. The regulator will play a key leadership role in working with water suppliers and infrastructure providers to support compliance with new regulations. We want to move quickly in putting this new framework in place. To enact the majority of these reforms and establish the regulator, we're aiming to introduce a water services bill by the end of the year, with possible enactment by mid-2020, everything going according to plan. Although these reforms address the immediate regulatory issues, we also need to address the wider funding and capability challenges facing the sector. We need to ensure that some communities don't fall behind the rest of the country, and that will build our regions equitably so that everyone benefits. Throughout the rest of 2019 and into 2020, my officials will be having discussions with local government, water industry experts, iwi, Māori, and others about options to improve three water service delivery funding arrangements. This may include thinking differently about how water services are delivered and paid for, including options for sharing costs across regional communities or a nationwide fund. I'm pleased to see some regions already showing leadership on this issue, such as in the Hawke's Bay, Canterbury and Otago. But as I've stated previously and continue to state, the public ownership of the existing Three Waters asset is a bottom line, regardless of what options are considered. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognise Infrastructure New Zealand and your valuable contribution to the Three Waters review so far. We look forward to your continued engagement in this work. On the issue of local government funding and financing, although we're addressing the immediate Three Waters challenges, we cannot shy away from the fact that there are wider funding and financing challenges across the local government sector as a whole. In particular, we need to find a better way to support councils and communities who are facing acute pressures on their infrastructure, whether that be in the form of high growth, low rate paying base, high tourist numbers, or specific economic challenges. Many have reached their debt ceiling limit. That's why when we came into government, we asked the Productivity Commission to conduct an inquiry into local government funding and financing, and where shortcomings are identified, to examine options and approaches for improving the system. A draft report has recently been released by the Commission. Some of you may or may not be happy with that report, so we hope that you continue on with the process as it's calling for submissions on to completion. There'll be a range of views in response to the draft report, and it's important that these are captured and considered. So I'm looking forward to your responses in the weeks to come. As you know, the Commission will release its final report later this year for the government to consider and then form its own response. As we work together to build our regions and communities, we need to be cognizant of natural hazards and the effects of climate change, the prospect of extreme weather events happening more frequently than it used to, including the associated impacts and risks to the natural and built environment. As infrastructure professionals, you're aware of the unprecedented challenges we face to ensure our infrastructure networks are well planned and resilient. This will require a joined up and coordinated effort across all parts of government. Our focus is on a joined up approach to enhancing community resilience, with central and local government working in tandem with iwi, communities and critical stakeholders. In June, the Central and Local Government Forum agreed to develop a joint resilience work program focusing on 5 key areas: information to support better decision making, enhanced use of risk assessment, enabling better decision making in hazard risk management and climate change adaptation, use of insurance markets and risk financing, and principles and approaches to funding and financing. The program and scope of this work are still being developed, and we have a team of resilience ministers engaged in this process, so expect to hear more as this work unfolds. While government considers the long-term resilience of our communities, we must also find ways to remove barriers to the development of infrastructure essential to the well-being of those people and communities that we serve. Put simply, the necessary infrastructure for housing in New Zealand is currently not being built. There are a range of factors at play. We've heard from local government and developers that many councils, particularly those in high growth areas, can't finance new infrastructure, including infrastructure that is crucial to support housing development. As part of our government's urban growth agenda, we're investigating new avenues to support infrastructure funding and financing. The objective is to deliver a viable alternative financing model to enable delivery of new infrastructure projects and upgrades, without being limited by local authority financing constraints. You'll hear more about this work from officials tomorrow, and we expect to make further announcements in the coming months once the Cabinet has made its decisions. On Maori housing, the housing crisis is particularly acute. The Maori home ownership rate is only 43% compared to 63% for the general population. Māori make up 36% of public housing tenants, yet comprise of just under 15% of the general population. And Māori are 5 times more likely than anyone else to be homeless. These statistics are not acceptable to our government. Late last year, the Prime Minister asked me to take responsibility for Māori housing as Associate Minister of Housing and Urban Development. Underpinned by an additional investment towards Māori housing as part of this year's wellbeing budget, we are identifying significant opportunities to positively impact on Māori housing outcomes and, more importantly, progressing Māori into a better, more secure state of housing. Why this matters is because we've just had some conversation around the importance of placemaking underpinning good community development decisions. So we need a significant proportion of our society engaged and moving along that pathway, which is why I'm focusing on this area. As we implement our housing agenda, our government is signalling that we're looking for partnerships to make home ownership real for whānau, and that social community housing developments can be done differently with Māori as a key partner. Just as our government is committed to putting wellbeing of New Zealanders at the heart of everything we do, all of the work streams I've discussed this morning are about improving intergenerational wellbeing and making Aotearoa a better place for everybody. Whether it's having a fit-for-purpose local government funding and financing system, working together to mitigate the effects of climate change and building resilience, or making sure all New Zealanders have access to safe drinking water, we're committed to a strong, robust local government sector focused on wellbeing. As part of this focus, it's important to ensure local communities are empowered to identify and participate in achieving their own wellbeing needs. What councils do is critical to this step forward. It's a step change that we absolutely need because each community has its own unique needs and priorities. That's why, as Minister of Local Government, I'm leading a conversation with local government to explore how we can better embed a wellbeing approach across local decision making. This work aims to build on the reinstatement of the 4 wellbeings that we've just achieved in the Local Government Act and improving key aspects of local decision making, such as more inclusive, effective community participation in local government, more specific wellbeing priorities in council plans, and better collaboration between central and local government in the provision of public services. Although there are good examples of these things already underway, we want to broaden and accelerate the uptake of innovative council practice in these areas. This work shares many of the same outcomes as Local Government New Zealand's Localism project, such as more empowered local communities, strong local institutions, and aligning our investment for greater benefit. However, we don't support the specific proposal for wholesale devolution of services. Rather, we propose a more nuanced exploration of how we can empower communities to maximise their well-being. It's a necessary conversation that underpins the work that you do in the infrastructure space, because as we've heard in terms of the way in which great cities have grown, they've always kept in mind the benefit to communities and people. Our government's extensive investment in infrastructure, the Provincial Growth Fund, is a strong vote of confidence and recognition of the work that you do as industry professionals and the importance you play in improving the lives of New Zealanders. The challenges are too big for any of us to achieve alone, that's for sure. We need to come up with the optimal solutions together, and I thank you for your contribution so far. I know that there's a wealth of experience and expertise here today, and I, like many others who have stood on this stage, encourage you over the next 2 days to continue to be bold in seeking solutions to some of the big challenges we have ahead of us as a country. Those things that I've discussed and those to follow have been put on the table because we know that we need to do things differently and we need to have a long strategic vision. But ultimately, we all need New Zealanders, every one of them, to benefit in the prosperity that our country can have for them. So we want resilient, healthy, confident communities. We want growth, and we want to do it in a way that keeps the heart of our communities intact. Nō reira kia koutou katoa mea o tini pūkenga I whakatōpū mai ki tēnei huihuinga. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. I wish you well for the symposium. Tēnā tātou katoa.